Part 1 video in this series discuss the framework God has provided our Israelite nations for our policies and actions based on his promises and blessings to our patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. In this Part 2 video, I discuss statements and actions President Trump has taken that have an impact on America's security. Hello friends, this is Unmasked Truth with Harmanjit Saini, where I provide unique analysis of world events based on the unmasked truth that after surrender, Germany continued World War II clandestinely and became a killing machine. I also provide true news that you will find nowhere else. In Part 1 video, I provided information on which nations are descended from the 12 tribes of Israel. The USA is descended from Joseph's son Manasseh. British Commonwealth nations of Britain, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and whites in South Africa are descended from Joseph's son Ephraim. Other nations descended from the other tribes of Israel include the Jews in Israel and worldwide, and a branch in Ireland from Judah. France from Reuben. Simeon and Levi were prophesied to be dispersed among all the tribes of Israel, with the largest portion of Levi or the priestly tribe living among the Jews. Holland is descended from Zebulun, Finland from Issachar, primarily Denmark and some in Ireland from Dan, Switzerland from Gad, Belgium from Asher, Sweden from Naphtali, Norway, Iceland, and some Jews from the tribe of Benjamin. I also listed God's promises and blessings conferred on our patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, which also impose obligations on us on how we deal with other nations. In light of these obligations, we can discuss some of the statements President Trump has made and actions he has taken that will have an impact on our security. First, I want the world to know that in America's security lies the security of nations to live in freedom. If America is not there to intervene or stop powerful nations from acting aggressively with threats of intervention, all nations will become slaves to Germany and China and some other nations to their neighbors. America's power helps maintain peace in the world than would be possible without America's presence. Now let's look at some of President Trump's statements, initiatives, and actions concerning America's security. President Trump has stated that he will take control of the Panama Canal, buy Greenland, take over Gaza, and settle the 2.1 million Palestinians in Egypt, Jordan, and possibly some other Arab countries, and make Canada the 51st state of the United States. I will analyze each of these stated intentions on the likely effect on America's and the world's security. First, the Panama Canal. President Trump has stated that he will take control of the Panama Canal. Chinese companies such as Landbridge Group and the Hong Kong-based C.K. Hutchinson Holdings now operate ports at both ends of the canal. With the recent visit of U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Panama has quit China's Global Infrastructure Club, its Belt and Road Initiative. That should just be the initial step. Panama Canal is one of the greatest security interests of the United States, and China is a rival seeking to destroy us. China should not be allowed to retain control of the ports at both ends of the canal or maintain facilities there that obviously are of dual commercial and military use. Panama should be required to terminate any such relationship with China because China is a security threat to the United States and Latin America. The Panama Canal is the most important sea gate for the United States and for much of the world, which we created. God gave us control of the major sea gates of the world according to the blessings and promises God made to our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, including the Panama Canal. We have a God-given right to control it and should work out an amicable arrangement with Panama in perpetuity. We already have such an arrangement concerning the permanent neutrality and operation of the Panama Canal called the Neutrality Treaty between Panama and the United States. It guarantees permanent neutrality of the canal with fair access for all nations and non discriminatory tolls. Only Panama may operate the canal or maintain military installations in Panamanian territory. China should not be allowed to set foot anywhere near the Panama Canal with its dual use facilities. I commend President Trump for taking action on this issue because China poses a major security threat to the United States. Then Greenland. China has all the critical minerals for its needs. It does not need to import any from other nations and, in fact, uses them as a weapon against other nations, particularly the United States. Yet it is trying to control all the world's minerals, including those critical to our modern electronics and electrical vehicles industries. Its goal is to control all the supply in the world to deny access to all other nations, especially those it views as competitors such as the United States, so that it can conquer them. USA has not used its power to do anything similar and does not bar access to resources of the world or shipping lanes of the world to anyone like China is trying to do. China has no business being in Greenland to control its mineral resources because it has plenty of them in its own land, yet it's already there in Greenland. Greenland is an autonomous territory of Denmark, a brother nation to the United States, with a population of about 57,000 and land area of 836,330 square miles. President Trump has stated that he wants to buy Greenland or take it from with force. If Greenland and Denmark don't want to sell, which they have said it's not for sale, and I don't blame them for that decision, then taking Greenland by force will not please God. I will show you how God acts to punish us when we act against His will. But coming back to Greenland, because of its mineral and other resources, nations seeking to dominate the world, such as China, are eyeing it and will grab it if they can. Germany can cast an evil eye on territories of others any time it wants and try to grab them. They won't have to use much force to subdue the 57,000 inhabitants, or even Denmark. Greenland needs relationships with the United States for its security to protect its freedom. So here is my suggestion. Greenland should sell a small piece of any kind of its territory of about 1,000 square miles to the United States, 500 square miles to Britain, and 500 square miles to France, so that they can have a legitimate presence in their land and can defend it for the benefit of the Greenlanders and their own holdings there, if needed. I would also advise Greenland to only let these nations develop the extraction of mineral resources, because only they can ensure that your mineral resources will not be weaponized by restricting access to them for anybody. I would not advise President Trump to use military force to take over the territory. God does not want our nations to behave this way in these end times. Then President Trump has stated that he will make Canada the 51st state of the United States. I would advise President Trump to not take any such steps. God promised to Jacob that a great nation and a commonwealth of nations will proceed from his two grandsons, Manasseh and Ephraim, respectively. This is God's promise fulfilled, hence God ordained. Trying to merge Canada with the United States will be going counter to God's will. Disobeying God brings curses. And Canada is a brother or sister country, whichever way we want to call it. We do not impose sanctions or tariffs on a brother country which has fought shoulder to shoulder with us in both world wars. Canada poses no security threat to us, and we can, in fact, rely on Canada for help for our defense if the need ever arises. We should not be competing with Canada to see which of us is richer or become even richer at the expense of our brother country. Now, one of the stated purposes of imposing tariffs on Canada and Mexico was to stop the flow of illegal migrants and fentanyl entering our borders. Less than 1% of the total fentanyl entering the United States comes from Canada, and less than 1 to 1.5%, depending on different estimates, of illegal migrants come to the United States from Canada. Canada has already agreed to take further steps in collaboration with the United States to stem the entry of illegal migrants into the United States. I doubt if any practical steps can be taken about the small amount of fentanyl coming into the United States from Canada, but I'm sure Canada would be willing to do all that the US has suggested do through friendly negotiations. There simply is absolutely no justification for imposing any kind of tariffs on Canada. Now, President Trump has stated his intention to taking over Gaza and asking Egypt, Jordan, and possibly other nations to take in the approximately 2.1 million Palestinians. Then he intends to have the area developed into a beautiful Riviera. I would advise President Trump against any such action because at the present time it's against God's will. Ultimately, when Jesus Christ returns to earth, which event is almost at our door, and sets up God's kingdom, the land of Israel will be given to all the descendants of the 12 tribes of Israel jointly, which include the Jews. No Palestinian or any other people will be found there. However, till that time, that land belongs to the Jews as well as the Palestinians, because before Israel became a country for the Jews, Jews and Palestinians came to the land at the same time approximately. That's why on God's side the land belongs to both of them. God also warns the Jews about taking over the land entirely from the Palestinians and expelling them all out of the country. That warning is issued through Hosea the prophet in Hosea 5 verse 10. Judah's leaders are like those who move boundary stones. I will pour out my wrath on them like a flood of water. Now, flood of water is a symbol for multiple nations. I would counsel Prime Minister Netanyahu not to bring God's wrath on his nation Israel by agreeing to any scheme to dispossess the Palestinians of territory in Israel. Please do not try to force prophecies before their time in God's plan. Otherwise, God will bring multiple nations on Israel to pour out his wrath on them. In fact, from prophecy, we already know that those nations will be an alliance of Muslim nations in confederacy with Germany. Now, there is an exception to this general command from God. The Temple Mount and the Holy Land surrounding it in Old Jerusalem belong to the Jews. Muslims in the world have their own holy places in Saudi Arabia. The Al Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock do not belong on the Temple Mount because Muhammad was never in Jerusalem. In an amicable agreement with Jordan, those buildings should be removed and placed on the east bank of the Jordan River or wherever else Jordan wants to place them, such as in Amman. The Palestinians in that area should be located elsewhere in a suitable place within the current borders of Israel with better housing and amenities than they currently have in Old Jerusalem as compensation. I'm also in full agreement with Prime Minister Netanyahu that there should be no two-state solution to the Israel and Palestinian problem. An independent Palestinian state will mean a deadlier security threat to Israel, as it will not be able to fully control what they do in a confederacy with other nations. For the past nearly 77 years, they have demonstrated that they do not want to live in peace with Israel. They will simply be plotting how to wage the next war with Israel. Now here's an example of how God dealt with King David when he planned to use his military force against some neighbors, probably to take over some of their territory, which God had not instructed him to do. The account is given in 2 Samuel chapter 24. Verse 1 says, "And again the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he removed David from them to say, 'Go, number Israel and Judah.' Job protested, but David's word prevailed, and Job brought the number of the fighting men in Israel and Judah to David." Then verses 10 to 15 state what happened. And David's heart smote him after he had numbered the people. And David said unto the Lord, I have sinned greatly in that I have done, and now I beseech you, O Lord, take away the iniquity of your servant, for I have done very foolishly. For when David was up in the morning, the word of the Lord came unto the prophet Gad, David's seer, saying, Go and say unto David, Thus says the Lord, I offer you 3 things. Choose one of them, that I may do it unto you. So Gad came to David and told him and said unto him, Shall 7 years of famine come up unto you in your land? Or will you flee 3 months before your enemies, while they pursue you? Or that there be 3 days pestilence in your land? Now advise, and see what answer I shall give to him that sent me. And David said unto Gad, I am in a great strait. Let us fall now into the hand of the Lord, for his mercies are great, and let me not fall into the hand of man. So the Lord sent a pestilence upon Israel from the morning, evening to the time appointed, and there died of the people from Dan even to Beersheba 70,000 men. This account seems to imply that God was capricious in killing 70,000 men of Israel, even though only David sinned in numbering Israel. But there is more to the story. Verse 1 begins with, And again the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel. This means people of Israel had sinned. That's why God moved David to sin. But there is still more to the story. A parallel account of the incident is given in 1 Chronicles chapter 21. Verse 1 states, And Satan stood up against Israel and provoked David to another Israel. Here we see that Satan provoked David to number Israel and not God. The two accounts need to be harmonized. After reading some commentaries, I found the best harmonized explanation provided in the United Church of God Bible commentary on the 2 chapters 2 Samuel 24 and 1 Chronicles 21. It says, while 1 Corinthians 21:1 says that it was Satan who moved David to take the census, Samuel 24:1 attributes this to God as a result of his anger toward Israel for some unstated reason. No doubt God allowed Satan to act, as he did with Job, for his own purposes. But why would God be upset at anyone taking a census when he ordered them several times himself in the past? For example, Numbers 1 and 26. Apparently, there was an attitude problem here, and that even Job was able to see. Perhaps David and the rest of the people were glorying unduly in their own physical might and power, as seems to be implied by 2 Samuel 24, verse 3. In context, the previous chapter, 2 Samuel 23, dealt with the deeds of David's mighty men, while 2 Chronicles 20 discussed wars and great deeds that had been accomplished. As we've seen, by the time of the census, God was clearly already angry with the Israelites for some reason, and the possibility that they had become swollen with pride and were beginning to put their trust in their own greatness rather than giving glory to and trusting in God seems to fit. Or maybe David was considering some unauthorized military expedition campaign, since all of those counted by David's chief general were vigilant men who drew the sword. The NIV says Job and the army commanders went out to enroll the fighting men of Israel. One of the proposed punishments would have allowed David to go through with any such plans, but he would have spent 3 months losing his battles. Now, following the census, David finally realizes his error, but as is usually the case with our own sins, the consequences will still something he would have to face. In this case, through the prophet Gad, God offers to him a choice of consequences, all of which would affect the entire nation. This may seem unfair, but remember the whole incident was prompted because The anger of the Lord was aroused against Israel. Israel as a nation was already guilty of something, and God is dealing here with David and the nation simultaneously according to his own divine purposes in a manner that seems to have been designed to humble all concerned. The commentary then goes on to explain further. In the incident, 70,000 men died of the plague. David in Psalms 41, 38, 39, and 6 wrote about sickness. It is quite possible that he may have contracted the plague himself, and that these psalms constitute prayers for deliverance from the disease as well as the sin that brought it about. David did not die in the plague but was healed. As king, he deserved the punishment as he was also guilty of the sin, but his prayers healed him. What can we learn from this incident? In that God is never unfair. He does not punish the people for the sins of the king and the kings of the sins of the people. However, in most cases, sins of the people and the king go hand in hand, and the king is often responsible for the sins of the people. His rule and personal example lead the people to sin. I may have been David. I. It may have been David's sin or pride in his accomplishments as a conqueror that led to the same sinful attitude in the people. Another lesson we learn from this example is that God punishes people for a sinful attitude to prevent the attitude from leading to sinful and extremely harmful actions. David and his men may have been planning an unauthorized campaign to conquer other nations to expand his empire. God never wanted Israel to do that. In all David's conquests, Israel was attacked first. God gave David the victory in every case. In this incident, God probably prevented David from attacking another nation or nations and committing an unrighteous act. If David had gone through with his plans, Israel would have suffered a deadly defeat that would have led to massive loss of life, perhaps in the hundreds of thousands of soldiers killed, destruction of much of the kingdom, and other deadly consequences. God took action to prevent David and Israel from going through that disaster. Now, Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump should learn from this example and not dispossess the Palestinians of Gaza. God promised David and ancient Israel for their attitude problem. That's why Prime Minister Netanyahu should not develop an attitude that is contrary to God's will. I will address President Trump's other actions and policies in other parts of the series. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please continue to watch my videos on important world events, World War III watch, politics, international business, how Bible prophecy is playing an important role in world affairs, advice on health and medical problems, and much more for in-depth and insightful analysis. Please also follow me on my YouTube and Facebook channels, Unmasked Truth with Harmanjit Saini. A reminder, 20th February 2025 will be my last post on X. Also a reminder that because of the urgency of some reports, I will not always be able to do videos. Unfortunately, no text or videos can be posted on YouTube. Therefore, the best place to read and or watch all my posts is Facebook.